I've recently stripped down a 228C lantern, and before I do any more work on it, I want to prove that the fount is solid. It's terrible to spend a bunch of time on a lantern only for it to leak. The easiest way to test a fount is to pump it up and dip it in some water. In this clip, we can see air leaking out of the fuel cap. This is very common, especially with 3-piece caps. Those cap gaskets almost always need to be replaced. I keep a spare 1-piece cap on my bench for just this sort of job. But unfortunately, even with my spare cap, there are still bubbles indicating a leak. The problem here is a little bit of rust where the cap gasket mates to the filler hole. To fix it, I polished the filler with some wet or dry sandpaper. First, 320 grit, which helped a little, and finally 2000 grit, which finished the job, leaving the filler leak-free. Sometimes there will be a leak where the valve stem goes into the valve. Often that can be cured just by tightening up the nut. You need to be careful with this. Too snug and the valve gets difficult to open, too loose and it leaks. If snugging up the nut doesn't help, the packing may need to be replaced. I can see a tiny leak from the valve and an even smaller one from where the valve goes into the fount. The connection to the fount will get fixed with a little sealant after I clean the inside of the fount. The valve stem will need a little polishing to cure that leak. This sometimes happens if somebody has way over-tightened the valve. I've had this 200 for many years and it's never held pressure. It looks as though it's leaking around the cap gasket, but even with my test cap, it still leaks. A little soapy water helps to show where the leak actually is. The solder around the fuel filler bung is bad and it leaks. I've tried resoldering this in the past, but haven't gotten it quite right. Someday I'll give it another try, and when I do, I'll also add epoxy from the inside to ensure a good seal. I'm not sure I'll ever trust this lantern. A leak here would shoot fuel-laden air up into the burner and could easily cause a fire. Finally, I've got a BQ lamp I bought a few years ago. I actually bought 2 at the same time, and this is the much nicer of the 2. There's only a little missing nickel, but the otherwise good outward appearance hides a terrible secret. In the water bath, we can see bubbles from a stress crack. This failure is fairly uncommon on Coleman lamps, and it might be a good candidate for an epoxy fix, especially considering the location of the crack and the relative rarity of BQ replacement founts. That said, I would still never use this lamp in the house for fear it would leak again. As you can see, the dunk test is a simple method for determining the soundness of a fount. Usually, if I have to clean the inside of the fount, I'll test it again after cleaning. Sometimes the cleaning process weakens the inside of the fount and it'll leak after cleaning. Anyway, thanks for watching. Oh, what's this? Bonus footage. Here's a potential future project I've had on the bench for a while. I wanted to see if it was leaking. I can see by the gauge that there's pressure in the fount and no leaks anywhere. Maybe we'll see this in a future episode of Lantern Lab.